So when you watch Ohio State and kind of see what they do defensively, I think one area that they should be concerned about coming into this Peach Bowl is definitely Stetson Bennett's legs. And it was not a one-off that quarterbacks had success running against Ohio State. Now, about half the games, there wasn't a ton of success for Ohio State. Excuse me, for quarterbacks going up against Ohio State. But even in the Notre Dame game, the quarterback in that game was functional for sure. I mean, he had positive yards at the end of the day, so he was sacked a couple of times. He really did not play well throwing it, but he was enough to cause problems for them. The quarterback for Toledo was a real issue on the ground against Ohio State. He had 70 yards on 7 carries, so he was an explosive player for them. Going 10 of 19 passing it, 2 touchdowns and an interception, and he scored a touchdown running it. Wisconsin, Graham Mertz, I don't know if y'all know that name or remember that. He was okay on the ground against Ohio State, really not much great, but a couple of runs, excuse me, 5 runs for about 3 yards with a touchdown in it. The the one to me that was a little bit, sort of concerning if you're Ohio State is Evan Hall, the quarterback at Northwestern, was a major part of their run game, and he had more yards rushing than he did passing against Ohio State. He ended with 122 yards running, 79 yards passing. Nobody could throw. I mean, that was more than CJ Stroud had that day. CJ Stroud was 10 of 26 for 76 yards that day. I mean, that was just not a day where you could really run the ball. Stroud did go for almost 80 yards rushing it. That was really not a day that he wanted. I mean, it was just not fun football, I guess you could say. But Evan Hall with, excuse me, Brennan Sullivan with I misspoke a minute ago. Evan Sullivan had the quarterback had 55 yards, not 122. Evan Hull was the running back at Northwestern. He had 122. So they really did run on Ohio State there. I misspoke a second ago. Obviously, Dexter Williams, a pretty good dual threat guy from Indiana. He had 46 yards on 16 carries, about 3 yards a carry. Uh, Pretty effective against the Buckeyes. And then Tagovailoa was okay, not really anything important. He did have a 26-yard run against Ohio State in that game. That was, you know, a tight game. I mean, I don't know if people really remember that. But then, like JJ McCarthy is probably, I would say Stetson Bennett is probably more well thought of in passing terms. But McCarthy did go 6 runs for 27 yards, a long of 19 with a touchdown in there. He was 12 of 24 against Ohio State. Donovan Edwards, as you recall, really just ran all through Ohio State. They averaged 7.2 yards uh, per carry for Ohio State for against Ohio State. This is there's really nobody that they've faced that's quite as good at both as Stetson Bennett. If you're picking up Dogstruction, please order it now so I can get this to you immediately. If you're watching this, I've been going to the post office consistently, dropping them off because in hopes to get them off to y'all. And a lot of people have taken advantage of this. Get them today. I'm pretty sure I'm not going to run out, but make sure that you're going to go. If you're going to order it now so that I can get it to you well before. I do not want to get y'all getting this on Saturday before Christmas. So order it now. Also, you can pick it up at Red Zone downtown in Athens on Clayton Street. But I think the number one thing in terms of all this, you know, the thing with Stetson, we've really not seen him rip people up on the ground this season the way it felt like he did a year ago. Now I say that, and then you remember the run against Auburn, or the play against Mississippi State, or the way he ran around against Oregon. Um, he's not had a huge day, a huge impactful, I guess you could say, day running it. The Auburn game for sure comes to mind. But I think with Stetson, um, what would concern me if I'm if I am Ohio, if I'm Ohio State is, he can really turn it on when he wants to. He scored 7 rushing touchdowns this year, y'all. The first 4 games of the season, he scored a touchdown running at every single one of those, and all the way up until you know the Auburn game, he was basically scoring a touchdown a game. The only one he didn't score was against Missouri, where they just really struggled that whole day. They played really well in the second half. They did not play well in the first half offensively. But, you know, here are the teams he did not score a rushing touchdown against: LSU, Georgia Tech, Kentucky, the Gators, and then Vanderbilt and Missouri. And, you know, the LSU game was a 4 touchdown game for Stetson Bennett. The throwing it. The Tech game obviously was kind of a blowout after a while. Two touchdowns throwing it. Kentucky was the game where I think that was probably his worst game. 13 of 19, 116 yards. Only 25 yards rushing. That was really Georgia. That cold, I cannot emphasize enough. Talking about Northwestern and Ohio State, that cold with Kentucky, that was a real problem. Mississippi State, he did score a touchdown. I forgot that big fake out game against the Gators, 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He was not really asked to run against Florida. Obviously, the Vanderbilt game was a blowout from the start. They were not going to, really do much. But when you have as many touchdowns as you've been sacked in the season, that just tells you kind of where this team is at in terms of not just protection, but Stetson's capability of moving around. He is as challenging a quarterback to lasso as there is in college football. I mean, he understands when to throw. He certainly understands when to run. Is this the Florida Gators with all blue and Oregon in all black? Boy, that looks horrible. Yeah, that's a lot of color right there. That blue is almost too much blue, it looks better if the other team has white on. But anyway, I think for me, it's going to be challenging for Ohio State to deal with all the collective parts that Georgia's got, and you know, he, Stetson understands when to move up in the pocket. He understands when to take off. He understands a lot of different stuff. He's It's really challenging to corral him in any particular spot, and he can make such sudden changes, dead legging people, and just whatever you want to call it. That he's a playmaker. That used to get him in trouble. I don't know if you remember that or not, but about the Auburn game of 2021, he kind of stopped the hero ball. I mean, that game right there was the game where I was like, hey, this guy's really developed. This guy's not doing just sort of stuff that doesn't make sense anymore. He is doing he is playing quarterback. And part of his arsenal, y'all, is part of Stetson Bennett's arsenal is the run game. And you could see it with Ohio State. You could see that they did struggle sometimes stopping quarterback run. Now, the caveat with all of that, having gone through this for this long, everybody struggles a quarterback run to some degree. I mean, it's a person that you're not typically accounting for, and that's the problem. Is I thought Aaron Murray could have been a really really good runner. Georgia just Mike and Mark Richt, they weren't gonna do that. I'm watching some Stetson highlights right now. I mean, the Auburn run was one thing, but it's like the run against Mississippi State, the play against Auburn, Oklahoma, excuse me, Oregon, where he threw the ball, the South Carolina game, I forgot about that. I mean, these are all the games that he shows you how deadly he is. And I think that's one thing to remember for Ohio State. That looks like a possible area where you can attack Ohio State, and I expect Georgia to.